Hey guys, tonight we're taking a deep, sleepy dive into a dusty medieval life you probably wouldn't survive more than a week in. Imagine it's dawn, cold air creeping through the cracks of a stone castle, and your mattress is more straw than bed. You're 12. You've just been booted out of your noble family's cozy manor, and now you live in someone else's keep. Your job basically glorified babysitting with chainmail. Welcome to the not-so-glorious beginnings of becoming a knight. You're a page, and everything smells like hay. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time down in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the rooster, which is unfair because the rooster definitely has less to do today. You roll out of bed, actually straw, and the first thing you feel is the damp chill of the floor against your bare feet. There's no central heating here, only central complaining. You grab your itchy wool tunic, which you'll wear until it's indistinguishable from the floor rushes, and stumble off to start the day. At this stage, you're called a page. And that sounds cute, right? Like a little chapter in someone else's book. But pages weren't flipping through stories. They were learning how to scrub, armor muck stables, and bow correctly for 10 minutes straight. Historians still argue whether pages actually received formal training in reading and writing at this age, or if that was reserved only for those with very generous noble patrons. Your first stop is the main hall, where the fire hasn't been lit yet, and the smell is a mix of smoke, moldy bread, and the ghost of last night's stew. Your mentor is still snoring somewhere upstairs, so you start your chores in silence. One of them. Gathering the laundry. You collect your knight's garments, which includes approximately 4.6 miles of linen, because everything had a specific purpose. Tunics, hose, underhose, and those mysterious bits of cloth no one talks about. By mid-morning, the other pages join you outside for what's generously called training. In truth, it's more like a chaotic recess, where someone's older cousin yells about honor while waving a stick. You practice swordplay with wooden blades, and someone inevitably gets hit in the fingers. Again. Your fingers. Again. Pages were supposed to learn the basics of knighthood swordsmanship, etiquette, music, falconry, and horseback riding. But most of that came after the hauling fetching and endless lessons in how not to offend someone 10 ranks above you. Even a misstep in a hallway could lead to a week of mucking pig pens as punishment. One particularly quirky training method involved chasing chickens. No joke. You were meant to learn speed and agility by cornering poultry in the courtyard without injuring it or yourself, which is harder than it sounds. It also doubled as entertainment for the bored noblewomen watching from balconies. It's all fun and games until someone steps in chicken poop and slides halfway across the bailey. Now you're expected to behave perfectly at all times. Which is weird, because the knights you serve regularly burp through meals, throw bones at the fire dogs, and sometimes duel each other over who insulted whose boots. But you're 12. You're expected to kneel correctly, speak only when spoken to, and memorize an obscene number of saints' names in Latin just in case someone quizzed you before lunch. Remember, your parents didn't just send you here out of love for medieval internships, they're investing in your future. This was the career track for second or third sons of nobility. Firstborns usually inherited land and titles. You get to scrub armor and dream of the day you're allowed to wear chainmail without bursting into tears from the weight. Speaking of weight, the average chainmail shirt could weigh anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds. And guess who carries that polished and ready to your knight each morning? You. Tiny you. And it must shine like the top of a whetstone, because heaven forbid Sir Grumbly Pants goes into a tournament with a smudge on his spalder. There's also church. Lots of it. Morning prayers, midday prayers, evening services, and sudden surprise masses because someone important is visiting. You kneel until your knees go numb and chant verses you don't understand but must recite flawlessly. It's deeply spiritual and profoundly boring. Perfect bedtime content. As the day winds down, you help serve dinner. Not eat, serve. You carry trays of roasted boar, overcooked cabbage, and trenchers, soaked in questionable sauce. If you're lucky, you get a leftover bone or half a carrot. No talking, no slouching, and definitely no accidentally spilling gravy on the Duke's lap, like that one time. You're still paying for that. Back in your corner of the keep, curled up in your straw bed, you listen to the sounds of feasting upstairs. Laughter music, the occasional clang of someone knocking over a goblet in triumph. You dream of one day being the one with the sword and the seat at the table. But for now, you're still just the page, the smallest cog in a big, noisy medieval machine. You might drift off thinking about your knight's polished greaves, or the way the stables smell like wet earth and regret. It's a rough life, sure, but it's the first rung on the long, muddy ladder to knighthood. By now, you're 12 and a half, and starting to think you've got the hang of this whole medieval intern thing. That is until Sir Gritchfield, your knight, starts shouting about a missing sock. Not just any sock. His lucky left sock, which is unfortunately in the fireplace because you thought it was kindling. You're not fired, though, because pages don't get fired. They get assigned more chores. Today's lesson: fetch, carry, polish, and smile like you enjoy it, because you're officially the castle's most underpaid gopher. You're not just learning to be a knight, you're learning how to serve a knight. Think of it like a medieval MBA. Heavy on the M for menial. Each day starts with a checklist that feels like it was written by someone who hated free time. You're responsible for fetching your knight's sword from the armory, his armor from the smith, his boots from wherever he last flung them, probably near the privy, and then arranging them all in his chambers in the exact order he prefers. If the boots go before the greaves, heaven help you. You've also got to shine the armor, not with some convenient modern polish, but with sand vinegar and elbow grease. The smell: a heady bouquet of iron vinegar, and that suspicious sock mildew that just won't quit. Historians still argue whether pages used raw wool or rough linen to polish gear, but either way, your knuckles end the day looking like you tried to punch a hedgehog. But polishing isn't even the worst of it. You're now the go-to errand boy for everything, from sharpening weapons to fetching dried lavender for your knight's room, because apparently Sir Gritchfield claims it helps his dreams of conquest. One time you were sent on a half-day trek to retrieve a particular goblet. He insisted only wine tasted right in. It was under a goose in the barn. Of course it was. And then there's laundry. Have you ever tried washing wool by hand in freezing river water while dodging leeches and pretending your fingers aren't turning blue? You haven't truly lived until you've wrung out someone else's underclothes while a duck watches you judgmentally from the bank. During meals, your job is to stand behind your knight and refill his goblet when he grunts. It's like being a sommelier, but with fewer perks and more threat of sudden backhand slaps if you spill. You don't eat until everyone else has eaten, and even then, it's usually crusts, turnips, and whatever the hounds rejected. But don't worry, your social life is absolutely thriving. You spend quality time with the other pages, usually, while cleaning the latrines or chasing pigs that escaped through a broken fence. You trade stories while scrubbing chamber pots, and every once in a while, someone dares someone else to sneak into the kitchen for an extra crust of pie. That one time, Thomas almost lost an eyebrow to the cook's ladle legendary. Oh, and speaking of chamber pots, you're the one who empties your nights. Every morning. It's a job no one wants, and yet here you are, proudly carrying Sir Gritchfield's special gold-rimmed waste bucket out the servant's door and into the freezing dawn. You start to develop a kind of relationship with the latrine trench. It becomes your confessional, your sanctuary, your shame. Quirky detail of the day, some knights actually insisted their squires or pages keep track of their bodily functions. Yes, really. It was believed to reflect one's overall health and balance of humors. So if your knight ate too much salted pork, and things went poorly, guess who had to report the consistency? Welcome to medieval HR. But through it all, you begin to absorb the rhythms of the castle. You learn who to avoid the grumpy steward who sneaks sweets from the pantry, Lady Mildreth, and how to make yourself invisible when the Baron is in a mood. You begin to sense the difference between a formal trumpet call and a "we've lost another chicken" trumpet call. It's an art, and slowly, painfully, you gain the smallest slivers of responsibility. One day, your knight actually asks you to bring his sword to him, not barks, not flings a boot at you. Asks. It's a moment of pride even if the sword nearly pulls your arm out of its socket. There's something deeply weird about how intimately you begin to know another man's life. You know his favorite boots, the way he combs his hair when he's nervous, the exact scowl he makes before complaining about the wine. You're part valet, part apprentice, part medieval babysitter. But this is all part of the grand plan. You're learning the ins and outs of nobility warfare and survival. You're just doing it with a laundry list in one hand and a chamber pot in the other. You sometimes wonder if real knights started like this. The ones in songs and poems, the ones who slayed dragons, wooed maidens, and were always surprisingly clean. Did they once scrub boots and fetch socks and suffer mild smoke inhalation, trying to restart a fireplace because someone forgot to close the flue? Probably. Historians still argue whether romanticized tales of knighthood reflected reality or were just elaborate PR campaigns. What we do know is that most of those glorious warriors began as pages just like you, covered in soot, aching from head to toe, and dreaming of battle while falling asleep next to someone else's dirty armor. As night falls again, you finish folding a tabard with a faded lion crest, and finally sneak a bite of the leftover stew. It's cold, but it's food, and for a moment as the fire crackles and your muscles throb, you feel something strange. Not pride exactly, but maybe persistence. The knowledge that you survived another day, that you remembered the sock, that you didn't drop the goblet, and that tomorrow, maybe just maybe, your knight won't yell about the lavender being too damp. It's been about a year now. You're 13, officially a teenager, which in medieval terms means you're considered just old enough to carry sharp objects and definitely old enough to be yelled at like a full-grown adult. Welcome to Squire School, though calling it a school is generous. It's less Hogwarts and more unpaid internship, where you're always on call and usually slightly muddy. The term squire sounds cool, right? You probably imagined it meant you'd be galloping beside your knight, your own sword glinting in the sunlight, maidens sighing in admiration. Instead, it turns out squire basically means butler with ambition. Your whole job is to shadow your knight like a glorified medieval assistant manager, just with fewer spreadsheets and way more horsehair in your soup. You now serve one knight and one knight only. For you, that's still Sir Gritchfield, who has recently decided his new hobby is falconry. Guess who has to stand in a field for hours holding a leather glove while a bird with opinions screams in your ear? That's right. You're now a bird perch. The typical day of a squire starts early and ends late. You begin by assisting your knight in dressing. That means wrestling him into his mail shirt, which is as cooperative as a wet canvas bag full of rusty nails. Then come the padded gambeson, the greaves, the breastplate, the arm guards, the gloves, and finally the helmet, which never quite fits and always results in some dramatic huffing. And yes, you are absolutely expected to remember the order of all those pieces, because if you hand him his gauntlets before his vambraces, there will be consequences. Not punishable by law consequences, but certainly cleaning the stables with a broken shovel consequences. You then follow your knight everywhere, which sounds heroic, until you realize everywhere includes watching him nap under a tree, helping him inspect the tilt yard, and politely pretending not to hear his attempts at medieval pickup lines toward the baron's daughter. Thou art comelier than a midsummer goose was. Bold. Your primary duties now include tending your knight's horse, caring for his weapons, preparing him for combat or tournaments, and generally making sure he looks like he knows what he's doing. When he rides into town, you ride behind him. When he practices in the yard, you set up the targets, collect the arrows, and occasionally get hit by one. Yes, even the blunt ones hurt. Especially the blunt ones. During meals, you still stand behind him, but now you get to wear a fancy tunic with his family crest on it. This is the squire's badge of honor, a wearable billboard saying, "I belong to Sir Grumbles-a-lot." It's your ticket into tournaments, feasts, and small talk with bored nobles who find you slightly more interesting than the tablecloth. A quirky bit of etiquette. You're supposed to eat only after your knight eats, unless he tells you otherwise. In which case you must eat with enthusiasm to show your loyalty. So yes, sometimes you have to fake enjoy cold pigeon pie just to make him look good. Now about those tournaments. You don't compete, not yet. Instead, you lug gear, a lot of it. Swords, shields, helmets, spare lances, and the ever-important banner. If you forget the banner, you may as well dig a hole and disappear into it. That thing is symbolic. Forgetting it is like showing up to a modern job interview in your gym clothes. Knights are very serious about branding. Historians still argue whether squires ever fought during tournaments or just served in the background. What we know is that some were allowed to step in during lower-tier events, often in less glamorous roles, like melee practice or backup jousting, if a knight fell ill or fell off his horse after a few too many goblets of wine. Speaking of which, another growing part of your job is managing your knight's less glamorous moments. When he drinks too much, you make sure he doesn't insult the wrong earl. When he eats too much, you pretend not to notice him loosening his belt under the table. When he gets in an argument over a game of dice and threatens to duel someone at dawn, you talk him out of it, or at least make sure he shows up with matching boots. Some days you're a groom, others a tailor, still others a therapist. You start to learn which herbal mixtures help with headaches, which buttons need reinforcing, and how to steer a half-drunk knight back to his quarters without letting the household see too much of his undergarments. The physical training ramps up too. You're now sparring regularly, not with sticks, but with dull-edged real weapons. Bruises or frequent blisters are a given, and occasionally you see stars after a clumsy whack to the helmet. But this is the path. No glory without grit, or at least that's what the old knight in the kitchens keeps mumbling between mouthfuls of eel pie. The castle has started to feel more familiar now. You know which stairs creak, which servant hides biscuits in the pantry, and which tapestries conceal decent napping spots. The other squires have become something like comrades, and you swap stories over stolen bread crusts. Remember when Sir Edric tried to mount his horse backward, or when Thomas fell in the moat chasing that duck? That duck, by the way, still waddles around like it owns the place. Your world is becoming both wider and narrower. You're trusted with secrets now. Sometimes whispered conversations about alliances, letters passed between hands, even rumors of war. But your own decisions still feel limited. You serve. You follow. You watch. Always watching. And sometimes late at night, after your knight is snoring and the keep has gone quiet, you sit under the stars and imagine your future. Will you be knighted someday? Will you ride into battle? Will you have your own squire to chase after you, carrying your sword and secretly cursing your name? Maybe. Maybe not. Historians still debate how many squires actually achieved knighthood. Some never did, cut short by war, illness, or scandal. But for now, you're still in the game, covered in mud, hair full of hay, dreams full of banners flapping in the wind. You drift off to sleep beside the stables, the soft snort of horses nearby, and your knight's snores echoing faintly through the stone corridors. Another day done. Another step forward. You're 14 now. Your knees hurt more often than you'd like to admit. Your back crackles in the morning like a roast over flame, and you've developed what can only be described as horse-scented skin. Because your knight's horse is now basically your roommate. Yes, welcome to the noble art of equine care, also known as clean, this poop brush, this mane, and don't get kicked in the spleen. As a squire, your new unofficial title is Horse Supervisor, except the horse is in charge, and it knows it. Sir Gritchfield's steed, named Valorous Thunderhoof, because of course it is an enormous warhorse with a deep hatred for being touched anywhere near the ears. Thunderhoof is gorgeous, powerful, and smarter than some of the barons you've met, but he also has a tendency to step sideways when you're not paying attention, usually onto your foot. You've had a broken toe for 2 weeks, but you're pretending it's fine. Every morning begins in the stables. You stumble in bleary-eyed and half-frozen, and are immediately hit by a wall of smells, hay-sweat manure, and something uniquely horsey that no perfume company has ever tried to bottle for obvious reasons. You feed Thunderhoof his oats, check his hooves for pebbles, and currycomb his coat until it gleams like wet bronze. Quirky fact: some medieval manuals insisted that horses could sense a man's soul through his breath. So you're advised to speak calmly, never approach from behind, and ideally offer them a handful of apples or dried figs. You once gave Thunderhoof half an apple, and he didn't try to bite your arm for a whole week. Progress. Historians still argue whether squires were taught advanced horsemanship early on, or whether they simply learned through constant bruising trial and error. You lean toward the latter. You've been dragged, nudged, and once fully sat on by a pony named Bors. There's no instruction manual, just you, the reins, and a whispered prayer that you won't be thrown today. Because Thunderhoof isn't just a pretty face, he's a warhorse trained for combat. That means he knows how to kick, trample, and bite on command. You spend hours walking him through maneuvers, helping him practice charging across fields and stopping on a dime. It's impressive, terrifying too. You've seen what his hooves can do to a practice dummy. You definitely don't want to be mistaken for one. And grooming isn't just cosmetic. If a knight's horse looks unkempt, it reflects poorly on both the knight and his squire and his dirtin. So you're constantly brushing, trimming, oiling the saddle, mending the reins, and trying to keep mud out of places you didn't even know horses had. There's also the matter of armor. Yes, horse armor. It's called barding, and it's as heavy and uncomfortable as it sounds. You help strap on the chanfron, the headpiece, the crynet neck protection, and the caparison, a fancy cloth covering, usually embroidered with the knight's heraldry. It takes forever, and if one strap is loose, you'll hear about it when Sir Gritchfield does a dramatic canter down the parade route and his horse's armor flaps like laundry in the wind. Some days you're tasked with exercising not just Thunderhoof, but several of the household's mounts. So, you mount up, ride around in careful circles, then try to convince each animal not to run full speed into the fence. You've developed thighs of steel and the patience of a monk. You've also started talking to horses more than people. They're better listeners anyway. You also assist the farrier, the medieval version of a blacksmith for horses. He shows you how to clean out hooves, remove worn shoes, and hammer on new ones without turning the horse into a snarling fury beast. You watch, learn, and eventually get to try it yourself. Badly. The first time you drop the shoe. The second time the horse sneezes in your face. The third time you manage to hold the hoof steady long enough to feel like you almost belong here. On especially unlucky days, you have to clean the stables from top to bottom. That means hauling out hay soaked in urine, replacing it with fresh straw scrubbing troughs, and applying poultices to itchy rumps. It's dirty, thankless work. but oddly satisfying in its own horrible way. There's something kind of meditative about shoveling endless muck while trying to remember if Saint Eustace is the patron saint of horses or just deer. Turns out, it's deer. And then there are the superstitions. Oh, the superstitions. Thunderhoof must never be mounted from the wrong side. He must never see his own reflection in a shield. You must never ride him after a full moon unless you've touched an iron horseshoe first. Are these real rules? Are they just pranks played by older squires? Unclear. But you follow them anyway because the one time you didn't, Thunderhoof rolled in a puddle while still wearing half his armor. Feeding is its own adventure. Horses are incredibly picky, despite their reputation. You learn the right mix of grains, how much hay is too much hay, and that too many apples will give your horse what can only be described as medieval digestive fireworks. You once had to explain that to your knight after Thunderhoof nearly cleared the courtyard with one powerful sneeze. The stable hands still talk about it. Every once in a while, though, there's a moment of beauty. You'll be walking Thunderhoof along a quiet path at sunset, the sky soft pink and the fields gold with light, and he'll nuzzle your shoulder with something almost like affection. Or you'll see him lead a parade in gleaming barding mane, braided with ribbon, and feel a weird pang of pride knowing you helped him get there. Still, you're not a knight. You're a helper, a cleaner, a handler, a living alarm clock and poop scooper with dreams of glory and straw in your hair. No one writes ballads about the squire who bandaged a horse's leg in the rain or scrubbed burrs out of its tail. But those quiet moments, the grit between the glory, that's where real knighthood begins. As the day ends, you hang up the saddle pat, Thunderhoof's neck, and finally let your shoulders relax. The stable is quiet now, just the sound of chewing the creak of wood and the occasional sigh of a contented animal. You sit in the hay back against the wall and close your eyes. Tomorrow there'll be more muck, more mane, detangling, maybe a new bruise or two. But for tonight, you've done your job. And maybe, just maybe, Thunderhoof won't bite you during morning brushing. The sword. That glorious slab of sharpened metal every squire dreams of wielding like a hero in a bard's tale. You've seen your knight slice through practice dummies, with ease, his blade gleaming like lightning under the sun. You imagine yourself doing the same, swinging effortlessly, enemies quaking in fear. And yet here you are, crouched by the hearth rubbing rust off a blade that smells suspiciously like damp cheese. Because before you swing a sword, you must clean a sword, and clean it again, and again. Sword maintenance, you discover, is 80% elbow grease and 20% questioning your life choices. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting. It's medieval quality grunt work, and you're now the department head. Every morning begins with checking the armory. The weapons are stored in a dark, cool room lined with racks, swords, axes, daggers, maces, and a few experimental things you're not entirely sure how to hold without losing a finger. Your knight prefers a long sword, which means you have to make sure it's always sharp clean and oiled to perfection. You wield a cloth and whetstone like sacred tools, because one speck of rust could mean disaster in a duel, or worse, a very loud lecture about shameful metal hygiene. Historians still argue whether medieval squires had formal lessons in metallurgy, or if they learned everything from grumpy blacksmiths with zero patience and lots of soot. You're inclined to believe it was the latter. Old Godric in the Forge says 5 words per day, and 3 of them are grunts. But he did show you how to apply a protective oil mixture made of animal fat, beeswax, and herbs, though it leaves your hands smelling like a wet sheep chewing mint. Then there's sharpening. You sit by the grindstone pushing the blade at just the right angle, listening for that satisfying hiss of steel against stone. Too fast and you warp the edge. Too slow and it's a waste of time. And if it snags, you start over. No pressure. Just the knowledge that if you mess up, your knight might be the one skewered instead of the other guy. And no, you don't get to use the sword, not really. Sure, you practice with dulled training weapons, usually in the courtyard, under the squinty eye of Sir Hubert, the weapons master. He believes in discipline, repetition, and hitting you with a stick when your footwork is off. Your shoulders ache, your wrists throb, and your shins have more bruises than skin. But slowly, so slowly, you get better. Your parries come quicker. Your strikes land cleaner. Your stance wobbles a little less each day. Fun fact, medieval swords weren't usually razor sharp like movie props. A battlefield sword had to endure armor and bone, not slice silk in midair. Most were kept sharp enough to cut, but strong enough to bash. The goal wasn't elegance. It was efficiency with just enough flair to impress the nobles watching from the bleachers. You also learn how to assemble and disassemble hilts, how to tighten the tang, and how to wrap a grip with leather soaked in wine to soften it. Why wine? Because apparently everything in medieval life involved wine, even swords. You once spilled a few drops, and Sir Gritchfield accused you of sabotaging his blade with peasant hands. You're still not sure if that's a compliment. Squires are expected to carry their knight's weapons at all times. Not just the sword, but the dagger. Sometimes a mace, and often a ridiculous ceremonial blade that's mostly for show, but weighs more than your torso. You become a walking arsenal. You dream of walking without the sound of clinking metal. You forget what it's like to move freely. During tournaments or battle drills, you lay out the weapons in a specific order based on how your knight fights. Fast access to the longsword, backup dagger to the right, extra whetstone in the pouch, a cloth to wipe blood or pudding or whatever lands on the blade. Once a pie crust somehow ended up smeared across the crossguard. Nobility is weird. Your knight also expects you to anticipate his needs. You're basically the medieval version of a tech assistant. He holds out his hand, you slap the sword into it without delay. He drops it, you retrieve it. He wants his dagger resheathed, you do it without poking him in the thigh. Usually. And then there's the testing. Your knight will suddenly want to feel the balance of his sword mid-feast. He'll wave it around dangerously near priceless tapestries while you hold your breath and pray he doesn't decapitate a roast duck or insult a guest by accident. That one time, he sliced the edge of the Duke's tablecloth clean off during a dramatic gesture. You're still apologizing to the steward. One of your lesser-known duties involves checking the edges of weapons before and after battle. After all, a nicked blade can shatter. You've developed the habit of running your thumb not along the edge, but across the side, checking for imperfections. You feel every burr, every notch. You see your knight's victories etched into the steel, and you know it's your job to keep that blade ready for the next clash. You also learn the difference between different kinds of swords. Arming swords, broadswords, bastard swords. Yes, that's really what they're called, and great swords. Each has its own purpose, its own weight, its own temperament. Some are quick and agile, others are heavy and brutal. Your knight once let you swing a greatsword in the training yard. You lifted it, tried a single overhand strike, and immediately pulled something in your back that still hurts when you sneeze. And not every weapon is for fighting. Some swords are purely ceremonial, decorated with gems inscribed with Latin prayers never meant to see combat. You polish those with velvet cloth and handle them like they might curse you. One of them might actually be cursed. No one's sure. It buzzes slightly if you touch it after midnight. Quirky tradition time, knights sometimes named their swords. Sir Gritchfield calls his Lady Thorn, which is either romantic or mildly threatening, depending on how sleep-deprived he is. You once suggested Mr. Pokey as a joke. He didn't laugh. You haven't made another joke since. By the end of each day, your hands are raw, your back is sore, and your ears are still ringing from the clang of steel. But you've learned something valuable. Not just how to maintain a weapon, but how to respect it. How to understand its balance, its strength, its limitations. A sword is more than a tool. It's a symbol, a promise. And someday it'll be yours to carry, but not today. Today you finish oiling the blade, place it gently in its sheath, and return it to your knight's chamber. You whisper goodnight to it like a strange little ritual. And then you collapse onto your straw mattress, dreaming of a future where someone else carries your sword, and maybe complains about how much it smells like minty sheep fat. You've just finished your 3rd hour of armor polishing when you hear the trumpet call, Tournament Day. That's exciting, right? Glory, honor, roasted meat on sticks. Maybe even the attention of a wide-eyed noble lady who finds your limp slightly charming. That is, until you remember you're not in the tournament. You're working behind it. Welcome to the glamorous world of being tripped over repeatedly while trying to hand someone a lance. Public events like tournaments are a knight's chance to shine and a squire's chance to get a bruise in the shape of a horseshoe. Everyone's watching, which means everything must go perfectly, or at least appear that way. Your knight. Sir Gritchfield insists on looking like a war god, so you've spent all morning starching his tabard, refastening his creaky shoulder plates, and brushing Thunderhoof until he resembles a parade float. You even trimmed his nose hairs. The horses, not the knights. Though honestly, both could have used it. Historians still argue whether these tournaments were true military training or just overblown pageants with too much wine and not enough rules. Truth? Probably both. Real weapons, real bruises, real competition, but also very real egos. And you're in the middle of it all, armed only with a rag, a short dagger, and deeply buried frustration. Before the festivities begin, it's your job to lead Thunderhoof through the crowds carefully. Children try to pet his flanks, someone throws a flower. One overly bold goose attempts to challenge him. You diffuse the situation with a firm voice and a turnip. It's chaotic, noisy, and smells like someone's been boiling cabbage under the sun. Once in the lists, your knight performs his obligatory dramatic pose, squinting nobly at the horizon. Meanwhile, you're behind him holding a helmet that weighs more than you did 3 years ago, and trying not to get stepped on by any of the 12 other knights, all circling the paddock like agitated peacocks. When it's time to joust, the real circus begins. You sprint to fetch the lance. You hand it to him just right. Shaft, vertical, tip down, banner fluttering. He gallops. Wood splinters. The crowd roars. And then your favorite part, you dash in, dodging hooves and shattered bits of pine to retrieve whatever's left of the equipment. You are the medieval version of a pit crew. It's terrifying and exhausting and occasionally hilarious. One time, a knight missed his mark and accidentally hit a scarecrow someone left behind from a harvest festival. The crowd still cheered. Another time, your knight dropped his lance and you had to run it to him while he was mid-gallop. You barely made it. He still blamed you for his loss. Naturally. But it's not all jousting. Tournaments include melee battles, giant messy, barely regulated free-for-alls. Dozens of knights bashing each other in what's technically practice, but looks a lot like revenge. Your job during these stay out of the way, hand off backup weapons, and drag your knight to the healer if he ends up face down in the mud again. Quirky detail of the day, some tournaments had rules that allowed captured knights to be ransomed back even in practice. It was a way to make money. If you defeated someone, their squire might come running over with a purse or token to settle the matter. Yes, even fake battles had financial paperwork. The worst part of tournament duty. The expectations. Nobles are watching. Ladies are watching. Their dogs are watching. And they all have opinions. Your knight must look majestic, fight fiercely, and not sweat through his embroidered surcoat. That last one is your problem. You sneak a scented herb sachet into his chest plate. You wipe his brow. You pray he doesn't drop his sword in front of the Duchess again. That was a dark day. Sometimes things go sideways. A horse panics. A knight forgets which end of the lance to hold. Or memorably, Sir Gritchfield got stuck in his own armor and had to be extracted like a stubborn cork. You were elbow deep in his gauntlets, trying not to laugh, while a group of minstrels composed a ballad on the spot called Sir Stuck-a-Lot. After the final round, there's a victory parade even if your knight didn't win. That's just how it works. Everyone smiles, waves, and pretends their armor isn't chafing. You walk a respectful distance behind Thunderhoof, holding the broken lance like it's a war trophy, and smiling at the crowd. A small child hands you a wilted flower. It's the first time today someone's looked at you like a hero. Then comes the real work, cleaning up. You gather scattered weapons, scrub off blood and pudding stains. Yes, pudding, don't ask, and help patch dented armor. You also track down lost items. A nobleman's missing glove. A baroness's hatpin. One time you found a ring lodged in Thunderhoof's tail. You returned it. Eventually. The evening feast is your brief moment to breathe. You're allowed to eat though, usually from the servants' side of the hall. You sneak bits of roasted lamb, chew slowly, and try to ignore the thunderous sound of knights boasting about how hard they were hit in the shoulder. Sir Gritchfield reenacts his most glorious moment 4 times before dessert. You also eavesdrop politics, gossip alliances. Tournaments aren't just for show. They're networking events with swords. You learn who's marrying whom, which lords are feuding, and that Lady Aveline's pet monkey bit the Archbishop again. Later, after most guests stumble off to sleep or strategic romance, you return to the stables. You check on Thunderhoof, remove his armor piece by piece, whisper a thank you for not throwing your knight into the crowd, and rub his legs with salve. He nuzzles you once, likely mistaking you for a carrot. As you lie down that night, your arms aching, your hands still smelling faintly of saddle wax, you realize how far you've come. You didn't trip today. You handed the right weapon. You remembered the name of the Duke's second cousin's dog, Sir Muffin. And maybe, just maybe, someone in that crowd saw you. Not as a background character, not as the kid holding the helmet, but as a knight in waiting. The horns blast at dawn, and everything suddenly smells like boiled onions, burning pitch and fear. Real fear. Not the kind you feel when Sir Gritchfield finds his socks unstarched. Actual fear, the kind that sinks into your boots and stays there. Because this time it's not a tournament or a demonstration for some visiting duke. This is battle. Or rather, it's battle for everyone else. For you, it's a logistical nightmare. You're the mobile toolbox, the nervous shadow, the heavily saddled runner dodging arrows and bad decisions. As a squire in wartime, you're not expected to fight, not officially. Your job is to support your knight with everything short of actual stabbing. That means carrying his spare weapons, minding the warhorse, guarding the camp, while everyone else gets dramatic, and most importantly, making sure Sir Gritchfield doesn't forget where he put his helmet. Again, before the march, there's chaos. Knights shouting for armor, soldiers scrambling for rations, horses stamping like they know something's up. You've already packed and repacked your knight's gear twice. Sword shield, dagger lance, backup dagger, flagon of water, herbal paste for blisters. The all-important banner folded just so, and a tiny sprig of lavender that he insists soothes the war nerves. You load Thunderhoof with all the essentials, double-check the saddle straps, and take a moment to stare at the field. It's wide and wet and mostly flat, which is good for horses but bad for your ankles. And you already twisted one 2 weeks ago during advanced log jumping practice. Not a skill you ever expected to use in combat, but still. The army begins to move, a slow, clanking serpent of men, metal, and mud. You ride near the rear, less prestigious, more realistic. No one's putting you at the front, not unless they're trying to lose a squire and make room for a younger cousin. Then, camp setup begins. You help erect tents, dig trenches, secure the horses, and guard the supply carts. Guard is generous. You sit on a barrel with a dagger you barely remember how to hold, staring at distant trees and hoping they stay very distant. Quirky fact: some medieval armies traveled with entire mini-villages of camp followers, blacksmiths, cooks, priests, and even musicians. Yes, you might go into battle with a guy playing a harp nearby. Motivation or madness? Historians still argue whether music actually helped morale or was just a convenient excuse to keep noble sons feeling romantic about stabbing strangers. When night falls, the mood shifts. You eat stale bread, a strip of dried meat, and maybe a ladle of suspiciously gray stew. Sir Gritchfield is nervous, which means you are busy. You tighten his armor, recite prayers with him, polish his sword again, just in case, and listen to him rehearse what he'll shout during his charge. His current favorite is for justice and biscuits. You suggest shortening it. He doesn't take feedback well. The next morning it begins. You watch from the sidelines your place as squire. You hold Thunderhoof's reins. You keep your knight's spare weapons within arm's reach. You try not to flinch every time metal hits metal with a sound like a thunderclap. And then someone yells for help. A knight loses his horse. Another drops his sword and panics. You're suddenly in motion, running across the churned mud, handing off weapons, helping someone remount, trying to stay alive without actually being in the fight. It's chaos. Smells like blood, sweat, and someone definitely dropped their travel cheese. You almost slip on it. Your knight comes back at midday, limping and cursing about that cheating baron with the double axe. You help him dismount, check his wounds, bandage his shoulder, and tell him he fought like a lion while also carefully removing a thistle from his backside. In the thick of it, your job never stops. You patch wounds with poultices you made from a healer's recipe. Garlic, honey, and moss, which smells worse than the wound itself. You help string new bows, sharpen blades dulled by chainmail, and keep the campfire going, even as rain soaks your cloak. At one point, you get assigned to deliver a message between camps. A simple task right here: say this, come back. Except the path is forested, visibility is poor, and you're pretty sure you heard a wolf, or a disgruntled minstrel. Hard to tell. You make it back heart-pounding only to learn the message was, tell them lunch is delayed. War is often waiting. You wait for movement, wait for commands, wait to see if someone calls your name in panic or triumph. You hear rumors, reinforcements, betrayals, secret tunnels, weather omens. You listen, learn, and stay quiet because squires aren't supposed to have opinions. But you do. Plenty. You just keep them behind your teeth and your helmet strap. One of your more unusual duties. Collecting abandoned gear after the fight. You walk the field once it's over, boots squelching air heavy, and gather helmets, swords, shields, and occasionally someone's entire lunch sack untouched amidst the mud. You do it silently, carefully. There's honor in cleanup, even if no one sings about it. And yes, sometimes it gets close. Once you were called into the fray to help retrieve a wounded knight. You ran onto the field, dodging swinging blades, wrapped your arms under his shoulders, and dragged him to safety. Your ears rang for a full day after from the scream of steel. Your reward: a loaf of bread, a nod of approval, and 2 new bruises. Historians often debate whether squires were ever fully armed during war. Some say only in emergencies. Others believe ambitious squires begged to join the fight. In truth, it probably varied. You haven't yet raised your sword in true battle, but you've seen enough to know it's not about glory. It's about grit, endurance, doing what has to be done while others watch cheer or fall. When your knight sleeps, you stay awake and oil the weapons. When he rides, you run behind him with the spares. When he falls, you lift him. That's your role. Not front line, not hero, but support, critical support. Invisible, if possible. And that's the strangest thing. How you've become so essential without ever being celebrated. There are no songs about the squire who carried the banner through a thunderstorm, or the one who found clean water when the stream turned foul. But you're there, always. That night, you lie in a bedroll by the dying fire, listening to the night's strange silence, the kind that only follows bloodshed. Your arms are sore, your cloak is stiff, and your feet itch from the march. But you're still here. And when Sir Gritchfield rolls over in his sleep and mutters, "Did I win you smile?" Yes, my lord. You did, even if he didn't. It's the morning after battle. The adrenaline is gone, the bruises are blooming, and your knight is hungover. Not just slightly fuzzy hungover. No, Sir Gritchfield is in full medieval collapse mode, groaning, clutching his forehead, claiming the sun is personally out to destroy him. And somehow, as always, this is your problem now. Welcome to your unofficial job as herbalist, bartender, nurse therapist, and bucket holder. You're a squire, which means you're the default caretaker for any and all nightly consequences. Overdrank at the victory feast. That's you. Got kicked in the ribs by a dance-happy baroness. Still you. Ate 3 suspicious meat pies and now sees visions of talking chickens. You're definitely involved. The day starts with a moan from the knight's tent. You poke your head in. He's lying there, armor half off surcoat, tangled like a defeated flag, and one boot still stubbornly on his foot. You recognize the symptoms, a medieval hangover of epic proportions. Fortunately, you've got the cure, or at least you pretend to. Historians still argue what medieval people actually used as hangover remedies. Some sources suggest vinegar and raw eggs. Others mention eel broth, cabbage leaves soaked in wine, or blessed salt. You've created your own go-to mix, mint-crushed barley willow bark tea, and whatever herbs the healer said wouldn't kill anyone. Does it work? No idea. But it smells impressive. You heat a little water, prepare the tea, and gently place the mug near your knight's hand. He knocks it over. You clean it up and make another. This time, he drinks. A small win. Then comes the cold cloth on the forehead. He groans in gratitude, then groans in pain, then falls back asleep. You use the moment to straighten his armor pile, empty his chamber pot, and for the 3rd time this week, polish the dent out of his favorite goblet. Sometimes, hangover duty goes beyond herbal teas. You've learned how to craft a perfect post-battle breakfast, soft bread soaked in broth, dried fruit, mashed into a paste, and a bit of sweet wine. Not too much. Just enough to trick the body into thinking it hasn't been poisoned. Again. Once you even hired a traveling bard to quietly hum near the tent to soothe the warrior's soul. The knight cried. Possibly from the music. Possibly from nausea. Either way, you earned a bonus crust of pie for your creativity. But hangovers are only the beginning. There's also illness. That tickle in the throat. That cough that won't go away. You've seen knights laid flat by fevers that turn into infections, that turn into real danger. No one wants to talk about it, but hygiene was limited. Wounds could fester. Water could betray you. Even the wrong cheese could ruin a week. So you learn to mix salves. Poultices. You recognize the smell of rot versus healing. You know which herbs calm a stomach and which ones you're not allowed to touch without gloves. There's a whole side of your training that has nothing to do with swords and everything to do with keeping your knight alive in spite of himself. And he's not always cooperative. Take last month, Sir Gritchfield developed a rash after borrowing another knight's fur-lined cloak. You advised drying it in sunlight, applying honey and crushed rosemary. He insisted instead on scrubbing it with sand and then wrestling a pig to sweat it out. The rash doubled in size. The pig, to be fair, came out of the ordeal just fine. You're also responsible for keeping your knight properly fed and hydrated. It's harder than it sounds. Medieval diets are creatively limited. Too much salted meat, not enough greens. Wine is safer than water, but also well wine. You beg the kitchen staff for extra onions. You trade favors for apples. You once picked berries near the woods and almost got chased off by an angry monk with a hoe. Then there's your job as emotional support. Yes, really. No one talks about it, but knights' big feelings. Sir Gritchfield once got misty-eyed over a falcon that didn't return. Another time he stared into the fire for 2 hours, mumbling about a dream where his sword refused to fight. Whether it's exhaustion, regret, or just noble melodrama, you're the one who listens. And listens. And listens. You murmur calming reassurances. You say things like, "The falcon probably joined a monastery." You wipe a tear discreetly. You never mock. At least not to his face. Quirky note. There's a medieval belief that noble men are ruled by the humor of color, making them passionate and prone to outbursts. You're pretty sure Sir Gritchfield is ruled by wine and regret, but who are you to argue with 14th century medicine? Some knights turn their angst outward, getting into fights, issuing duels over spilled mead, or accusing others of dishonoring their banners. You're the one who smooths it over. You run between knights like a tiny diplomat, carrying apologies tokens, and occasionally wine bribes. You also monitor pre-battle nerves. Your knight will pace, he'll shout. He'll demand his armor be relaced 3 different ways. He'll lose his dagger again. You'll recheck the saddle girths, double count the arrows, and hand him a calming leaf to chew like a war goat. Then you'll step back and pretend none of it frazzled you. But it does wear on you. You're young, but not invincible. The constant watchfulness, the burden of being responsible for someone more powerful than you, it adds weight. You fall asleep quickly now, the second you hit your bedroll, but you also wake up at the slightest sound. A creak. A cough. A whispered curse. You're always on, and sometimes you get sick too. You hide it. You work through it. Because a squire doesn't get rest. Not officially. You're expected to carry on even when your knees wobble and your stomach turns. One time you fainted halfway through brushing Thunderhoof. You woke up under a blanket with someone's stolen chicken perched on your chest. No one mentioned it again. Historians wonder just how many squires burned out before they reached knighthood. The records don't always say. There are gaps, missing names, untold stories, but you can feel them. In the quiet corners of the camp, in the eyes of older squires who serve but never speak, in the way your knight pauses when you stumble and for once says nothing. As the evening rolls in, Sir Gritchfield finally stirs, rubbing his temples and mumbling, "Was I victorious?" You hand him his cup of willow tea, still warm. "You were magnificent, my lord," you say. He grins, then winces. "Did I sing?" "Yes." "Was it the falcon song again?" "Yes." He groans but drinks the tea anyway. And you tuck the blanket tighter around his shoulders, pat Thunderhoof good night, and settle onto your stool. Another battle survived, another hangover handled, another quiet victory for the knight's invisible shadow, another training day. The sky is just beginning to smear itself with a pale blue blush, and the air smells like morning dew and damp wool. You stretch your arms, which immediately complain about yesterday's bruises, and you prepare yourself for another round of how many times can I get hit with a blunted sword before breakfast. This is the fine art of not dying in training. A subtle blend of technique, stamina, pain tolerance, and pretending that you totally meant to fall like that. Because now that you're older, stronger, and slightly more confident, the sparring drills have become far more serious and far more dangerous. Your knight insists that a good squire is a practiced one, and that means daily sparring. Swords, staves, maces, and the occasional surprise weapon, which once turned out to be a chair leg. You think Sir Gritchfield might have made that one up on the spot, but it still left a bruise the size of a turnip on your shoulder. Your wooden practice sword is heavier than it looks and unforgiving when mishandled. Each swing must be measured precise, yet powerful. Every block rattles through your wrists. Every missed parry is a new bruise, usually in a spot you didn't think could bruise. You start naming them just to stay entertained. Sir Purple Elbow joins you often. Training sessions are long, painfully long. Under the watchful gaze of the castle's weapon master, Sir Hubert, who seems to have been carved from boiled leather and bad dreams. You and the other squires are drilled relentlessly. Footwork first, he bellows. What good is a blade if you trip over your own knees? You sidestep, pivot, duck. You're not just learning to swing, you're learning to survive, which, oddly enough, involves knowing when not to fight. When to deflect, when to flee, when to fall and roll and pop back up like a startled squirrel. Historians still argue whether squires were taught advanced techniques early on or gradually introduced through painful experience. The answer from your perspective is a lot of both. You've definitely learned what not to do the hard way, like forgetting to tuck your chin when falling, or assuming the heavier squire won't actually sit on you. He did. And while most days are structured morning drills, afternoon sparring, evening review, some are less so. You might be asked to fight blindfolded, or with your non-dominant hand, or while quoting chivalric virtues between swings. Mercy, humility. Ow, dignity. Even the practice weapons hurt. Blunted edges still crush bones. Padded armor still lets you feel every impact. One squire cracked a rib. Another bit his tongue so hard he couldn't speak for a week. An oddly peaceful week, honestly. Still you persist, because through the soreness, the sweat, the ringing ears, you're starting to feel it progress. Your reflexes sharpen. You read opponents' movements faster. You move with more intention and less panic. You begin to anticipate. You land hits. You even win a bout or two. And then, as a reward, they hand you a shield. Now it's time to learn balance. With a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, everything shifts. Your movements must adjust. Your posture changes. The weight pulls you slightly to one side. It's awkward. It's exhausting. It's actually kind of fun. That is, until your sparring partner decides to practice real combat pacing and charges you like a frenzied goat. You spend the next hour pulling straw from your tunic and reconsidering your life choices. The bruises start to tell their own stories. That crescent on your hip, from a low sweep you didn't see coming. The welt on your bicep. From underestimating Lady Cecily, a visiting squire who fights like a caffeinated badger. You two have become unlikely friends bonded through mutual pain and shared grumbling. A quirky tidbit, some knights believed sparring should be done with real weapons, dulled only slightly to build true awareness. You're thankful Sir Gritchfield disagrees. You'd prefer to keep all your original limbs, thank you very much. In between combat sessions, you study technique. You watch the older squires analyze their movements. You listen to tales of great battles, half instruction, half boasting. You try to copy a parry you saw yesterday and promptly fall over. Progress. Then there's the horseback training. Yes, horseback combat training. You mount Thunderhoof, who is still unsure how he feels about your ambitions, and you try to coordinate your arms, legs, and eyes while charging at a target shaped like a scarecrow in a helmet. It's like trying to write poetry while riding a barrel down a hill. You practice swinging at targets while riding past them. You practice turning mid-canter. You even attempt to draw your sword with one hand while keeping the reins steady with the other. You nearly fall off twice and accidentally hit a tree branch once. Thunderhoof remains unimpressed. These mounted sessions are some of the most difficult and the most exhilarating. You feel the wind on your face, the rhythm of the horse under you, and just for a moment you glimpse what it might be like to be a real knight. Then you drop your sword and have to dismount to fetch it from a muddy puddle. The illusion fades slightly. Combat training isn't all hits and horses, though. There's wrestling, too. Grappling throws holds. You spend an entire afternoon learning how to roll someone onto their back using only your hips and momentum. You fail repeatedly. Your opponent ends up sitting on you. Again. You also learn how to fall. Yes, how to fall. Because in real battle, falling badly can end you faster than any blade. You practice collapsing safely, rolling from impact, minimizing injury. You become very familiar with the taste of dirt. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. You've been knocked over, disarmed, lightly concussed, and possibly sat on. Your limbs tremble. Your muscles burn. Your tunic is stiff with sweat. But you know something changed. You're just a little bit sharper, a little more sure, a little less breakable. That night you rub ointment onto your bruises. It smells like fermented garlic and disappointment, but it helps. You lay back on your straw mattress, arms spread, eyes sore. And as you drift off to sleep, you imagine yourself in gleaming armor sword, raised riding into battle with a confidence forged not from dreams but from days like this. Days that hurt, days that taught, days that built something inside you that no one can take away. You may not be a knight yet, but you're starting to fight like one. It's not always swords and saddles. Sometimes it's spoons and silks. Tonight is one of those nights, a grand feast at the Lord's Hall, which means you, humble squire, must wriggle into a tunic that itches like it's made of weaponized burlap and try to blend into a world of glittering goblets, roasted peacocks, and awkward small talk with people who use the word shall unironically. Court life is a performance, and you're not just in the audience, you're on the stage, whether you like it or not. You arrive behind Sir Gritchfield, who's already sweating through his doublet and nervously smoothing his beard. Your job. Make him look good. Keep his goblet filled, his boots clean, and his ego intact. This is the fine art of pretending to belong somewhere fancy. You take your spot just behind your knight's chair. Not too close, you don't want to breathe on the Baroness. Not too far, or he'll bark your name across the hall when he drops his spoon for the 5th time. Yes, 5. You counted. The meal begins. Trumpets. Announcements. A priest muttering blessings that last longer than some minor battles. You bow, smile faintly, and try to ignore the immediate aroma of 20 different meats roasting at once. Boar, venison, chicken, swan, somehow even eel. The smells mix into a heady perfume of opulence and indigestion. Feasting in theory sounds glorious. But for squires, it's a mental and physical workout. You're constantly on alert. Is the wine pitcher full? Are the knives polished? Is your knight about to launch into a long-winded tale about the time he single-handedly defeated a group of bandits who were actually just startled farmers? You gently clear crumbs, pour drinks, adjust plates, and silently judge the choices of noblemen who eat pheasant with their hands and then wipe them on the dog. Quirky detail of the night. One lord insists on having a gold spoon that must be blessed by a priest before every meal. Another demands his wine be stirred 3 times, counterclockwise to ease the spirits. You oblige, smiling your best. I don't get paid enough for this smile. You don't get paid at all. Court life also involves entertainment. Jesters, minstrels, acrobats, and sometimes a man who juggles flaming torches while standing on a pig. You stand still, hands folded, while the nobility laughs, claps, and throws bits of bread. One minstrel begins a song about the virtues of a brave knight and his clever squire. You glance at Sir Gritchfield. He's weeping softly. From pride or wine, hard to tell. Sometimes you're drawn into the spectacle. Dance with the lady's maid, someone insists, or sing the squire's song. You panic. You mumble. You try not to trip over your own boots while performing a courtly bow that somehow turns into a partial squat. Applause, laughter. You're not sure, but at least you didn't spill the soup. The dance floor opens. Nobles twirl in silken waves, their slippers gliding across polished stone. You don't dance. You linger near the shadows, making sure your knight doesn't do something embarrassing, like mistake a duchess's dog for a footrest again. It was one time, and the dog hasn't forgotten. You're also watching, always watching, learning. Who speaks to whom? Who rolls their eyes? Who sneaks off during the toast? Court life is as much politics as pageantry. Alliances are hinted at in passing glances. Rivalries simmer beneath polite laughter. Historians still argue whether squires were encouraged to eavesdrop and report, or if they just did it out of survival instinct. Either way, you keep notes in your head. You start to notice the quiet power players, the steward who controls the guest list, the seneschal who always sits closest to the host, the elderly lady no one dares to interrupt. You memorize names, symbols, whispered rumors. It's like sparring, but with smiles instead of swords. And sometimes, amid the choreographed chaos, you find an unlikely moment of connection. A passing glance from another squire across the hall. A shared grimace during the Earl's 7th retelling of the great fish soup incident. You steal a moment outside under the moon and breathe in the crisp air, far from the sweaty warmth of the feast. Your tunic is still itchy, but the stars make up for it. Back inside, the feast reaches its peak. Dancers leap. Someone knocks over a candelabra. A roast goose escapes a platter and causes minor chaos until cornered behind a tapestry. Through it all, you remain upright, poised, helpful, occasionally smothering laughter with a well-timed cough. Then comes the post-feast slump. Nobles loll in their chairs, wine-drunk and drowsy. Your knight wants his boots removed. Now, while he's still seated, you crouch, tug, try not to gag from the mix of leather sweat and mushroom gravy. You succeed, barely. He pats your head like a loyal dog. You resist the urge to bite. Cleanup begins. The servants handle most of it, but you help. You stack plates, collect scattered silverware, retrieve lost items, a slipper, 2 buttons, a perfectly whole apple somehow lodged under a bench. The castle is quieter now, the noise replaced by gentle harp music and the scraping of chairs. You're one of the last to leave. The hall now smells of wax, spilled wine, and faintly singed pigeon feathers. You escort your knight to his chamber, half supporting him, as he recites bits of poetry that may or may not be aimed at you. You smile politely. You help him into bed. You remove the golden chain he forgot he was wearing. You tuck him in. And then, finally, you sneak into the kitchen and claim your reward. A cold heel of bread, a slice of leftover roast, and the last scoop of stewed apple. You eat by candlelight, feet dangling from a barrel, eyes closing between bites. Court life may seem glittering from the outside, but from where you stand, it's slippery floors, false smiles, and endless patience. You play your part, you learn the rhythms, you adapt. Because someday when you're the one seated at the high table, goblet in hand, someone else will be pouring your wine. And you'll know with perfect clarity how hard they're working not to spill it. The sun is barely up, but you've already been awake for hours. You've completed your morning tasks, feeding the horses, checking the armor, making sure your knight has not lost another pair of gloves, and now, after a quick breakfast of stale bread and watered-down wine, the gourmet experience that it is, you're preparing for a ride. It's a simple ride, really. Nothing too fancy, just an unimportant errand for your knight Sir Gritchfield to deliver a letter to a neighboring lord. But somehow, these simple errands always end up being far more complicated than they sound. You're no longer just riding along the road. You're learning the intricate details of diplomacy strategy and, most importantly, how to manage someone else's image. The letter you carry may be about trade or troop movements, or just a thank you for a dinner invitation. But in this world of medieval politics, every letter carries weight. You climb into the saddle, adjusting your cloak, and take a deep breath. You pat Thunderhoof, who looks unimpressed with the whole idea of being a noble's horse again, as if he's forgotten how much he likes being the center of attention at a banquet. The saddle creaks under you, a sound that's grown more familiar over the years. It's not a noise that promises comfort, but rather the quiet endurance of repetition. You've made it through countless hours of training, combat drills, and endless days of running errands, and you're beginning to realize something. These rides, though, often dull and mundane, are just as important as anything you'll ever do in battle. You set off slowly at first. It's a clear morning, and the road is calm. The countryside is rolling hills and winding paths dotted with the occasional farmstead or abandoned chapel. You've ridden this route 100 times before, but today it feels different. Maybe it's the knowledge that every moment of your life is edging you closer to something bigger, something far more dangerous. You can almost hear the weight of your armor settling onto your shoulders, even though you're still far from the field of battle. As you ride, you feel a peculiar sense of detachment, almost like you're no longer part of the world around you. The road stretches ahead, seemingly endless, and all you have is the rhythmic beat of Thunderhoof's hooves to remind you that time is moving forward. You think about the things you've learned. You've gotten good at reading the weather, understanding how to steer a horse by instinct, and spotting the subtle differences between a well-kept path and one that might lead you into trouble. But today's ride is about more than just travel. It's about the message you carry, the letter from your knight, a piece of his future bound in parchment and sealed with wax. You've learned over the years that even the most seemingly insignificant deliveries can be a matter of life and death. A misstep on the road, a wrong turn, an accidental insult during an exchange of pleasantries, these can all spark rivalries or even violence. It's your responsibility as the squire to ensure that none of that happens. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about maintaining the delicate balance of power between the two lords you're delivering the message between. Historians still argue whether squires were ever fully involved in their knights' political maneuverings, or whether they were merely pawns dutifully delivering messages without knowing their significance. You've always suspected it was a little bit of both. You've had your share of overhearing discussions, watching your knight make decisions that could alter the course of a dispute, or simply make an ally feel respected. And you've learned to keep quiet, absorbing the lessons without asking too many questions. Because asking questions can get you into trouble, especially when it comes to the nobles and their ever-shifting allegiances. As you approach the neighboring lord's estate, you spot the familiar silhouette of the castle in the distance. It's a place you've visited before, but every time you see it, it seems a little more intimidating, a little less welcoming. This is where the political game happens. You're not just riding into a peaceful manor. You're entering a world of whispered deals and unspoken tensions. You dismount outside the gate, a guard on duty, eyeing you suspiciously as you approach. You don't mind it. Guards are always suspicious, always wary of newcomers. You hand over the letter, give a respectful bow, and wait for the formalities to be completed. The squire in you is familiar with the drill. It's part of the ritual, part of the subtle dance of court life that your knight constantly plays. As you stand there waiting for the response, you feel a shift in the air, a change in the way the land feels around you. You're on the edge of something, but you don't know what. Is it the tension of the political environment? Is it the way the Lord's men are looking at you? Or is it simply the ever-present knowledge that one misstep could send everything into chaos. Eventually, the Lord's messenger returns holding a response for Sir Gritchfield. You accept it with a nod and mount Thunderhoof once more. The road back is quieter than the journey here. The urgency has faded. You're no longer carrying the weight of a potential diplomatic disaster on your shoulders. But there's still something gnawing at you, something unsettled, that you can't quite put into words. Back at camp, as you hand over the letter and relay your experiences, Sir Gritchfield listens carefully, his expression unreadable. You've learned that knights like him rarely show emotion unless it benefits them. He nods a brief acknowledgement of your efforts and immediately moves on to the next task, whether it's polishing his sword or preparing for another ride. You, however, stay back for a moment, your mind replaying the events of the day. You've been a squire for years now. You've seen knights come and go, some rising to greatness, others falling forgotten. But what about you? What is your path? You've delivered countless letters, fixed broken swords, cleaned stables, and even filled in for a knight in a training match. Yet every time you step away from the immediate tasks, you ask yourself one question: is there something more? Is knighthood your true destiny, or is it simply a series of errands and battles of messages and deliverables, of blood and sweat wrapped up in the title of someone else's ambition? It's a question you've asked more times than you care to admit. But for now, you focus on your knight. You fetch the proper equipment, remind him to eat, and silently wonder if he ever asks himself the same thing. Does he dream of something more, or is he satisfied with the world he's built? As you settle into your nightly routine, cleaning armor, inspecting gear, quietly listening to the murmur of the camp, you know the answer won't come today. But one day it will. One day you will know whether this life is your path, or simply the road that gets you somewhere else. For now, all you can do is carry on carrying your knight's sword and your own future in the silence of the night. The air feels different today, a subtle shift, as if the very world knows something you don't. The days are blending into one another, training, polishing armor, delivering messages, checking horses, learning the way of the sword, and yet there's a gnawing feeling deep in your gut that today will be unlike the others. You can't put your finger on it, but it's there. You've spent enough time under the shadows of nights to know when the air smells of change. Sir Gritchfield is on edge. You can tell by the way his hand twitches around his sword hilt, the way he constantly checks his armor, the way he commands you to recheck his equipment for the 100th time this morning. It's not the usual pre-battle nerves. It's something else. He's anxious, restless, as though waiting for something to happen. You don't ask what it is. You just continue your tasks, keeping one eye on your knight while preparing your own gear. It's an unusually quiet day for the castle. The servants move about with purpose. The horses are all saddled and ready, but no one seems to be talking. The camp is eerily still, like the calm before a storm. And then, just as the afternoon sun starts to dip behind the trees, the horn sounds a single sharp note that cuts through the silence like a blade. It's time. You don't need to be told what it means. You've been here long enough to recognize the sound of an approaching conflict. It could be a raid, a sudden skirmish, or something worse. Something far more serious. Whatever it is, you know that you are not just a bystander. You're involved, always have been, always will be. Prepare yourself, Sir Gritchfield mutters as he strides past you, already pulling on his gauntlets. You nod, though the knot in your stomach is tightening. This is it. This is the moment where everything you've been working toward finally becomes real. The sword is no longer just a tool for practice. The shield is no longer a piece of wood. It's the barrier between life and death. You rush to your post quickly, checking your gear, making sure everything is in place. The saddle is tight, the straps are secure. You glance over at Thunderhoof, his mane shifting in the wind as his ears flick toward the commotion in the distance. He's nervous, just like you. The two of you are bound by more than just duty. And then it happens. A shout. A clash. Metal on metal. The battle has begun. Sir Gritchfield mounts his horse, and you follow your mind racing as you push your nerves aside. This isn't about fear anymore. It's about survival. It's about duty. As you ride toward the battleground, you can hear the sounds of chaos in the distance, the clash of steel, the shouts of soldiers, the pounding of hooves. Your heart is racing, but it's a different kind of racing now. It's no longer the anxious pulse of waiting, it's the adrenaline of action. You arrive on the edge of the battlefield, your knight leading the charge. The battlefield is a blur of movement knights on horseback, charging infantry on foot, clashing with each other in tight formations. You're not part of the action, at least not yet, but your presence here is a reminder of what you've trained for. Your job is to stay close to Sir Gritchfield, be ready to offer him his sword, to carry his spare shield, to hand him water when needed. But mostly, you're the invisible assistant, always ready, always on standby. Your knight dismounts, joining the ranks of infantry. You do the same, quickly falling into formation with the other squires and soldiers. You can feel the weight of your sword at your side, the metal cold against your fingers. It's surreal, the realization that today you're not just a bystander. Today you might fight. But for now, you wait. You follow orders, staying by Sir Gritchfield's side as he moves through the chaos. The clash of weapons is deafening, and the screams of the wounded echo in the distance. The smell of blood and sweat fills the air, sharp and metallic. You can't help but feel a chill run down your spine, even as you force yourself to focus. The sword is still unfamiliar in your grip, the shield awkwardly heavy, but you can't afford to be distracted. You need to keep your knight safe. The first casualty appears in a flash of movement, a knight on horseback, his arm raised high with a spear, but his horse suddenly stumbles. The knight is thrown, landing hard in the mud. You can hear the sickening crack of his armor against the ground, and for a moment you forget to breathe. The reality of it hits you, the knowledge that in this world, life is fragile, fleeting. Sir Gritchfield gives you a sharp look and motions toward the fallen knight. He's still alive, but it's clear he's badly wounded. His horse is spooked, thrashing in the mud. Without thinking, you rush forward, grabbing the reins of the horse and trying to calm it, pulling it back from the battlefield where it's bound to cause more chaos. The knight's blood is staining the ground, mixing with the churned-up dirt. You've seen blood before on training dummies in practice bouts, but this is different. This is real. This is life and death. The knight's gaze locks onto yours for a moment, a silent plea for help. You do what you can, offering him water, speaking soft words of reassurance. But you know you can't do much more. You hear a shout from behind you. Sir Gritchfield is calling you back. There's no time for hesitation. You leave the fallen knight where he lies, hoping someone else will come to his aid. The rest of the day blurs together in a haze of movement, adrenaline, and the relentless pounding of your heart. The sounds of battle are all-consuming. You move between Sir Gritchfield and the other knights, offering assistance, staying out of the way, but always ready. You realize quickly that there's no room for error. A single misstep could mean disaster. Eventually, the battle ends. The field is littered with bodies, some still moving, others not. The wounded are tended to, the dead are counted. You've survived, but you're left with a sickening feeling in the pit of your stomach. You helped, you served, but you didn't fight. Not really. You didn't face the enemy the way your knight did, with a sword raised high, charging into the fray. Historians still debate whether squires should have been thrust into battle earlier, or whether they were right to wait until they had completed their training. You're not sure either. What you know is that today you were a part of something far bigger than yourself. You saw the price of knighthood, the blood, the sweat, the sacrifices. And yet, you also saw the glory. You saw the men who fought and died for something greater than themselves. You saw their comrades lift them up, honor them, and carry on in their stead. Maybe, just maybe, that's what you'll become someday. For now, though, all you can do is help Sir Gritchfield back to camp, help tend to the wounded, and prepare for the days ahead. The battle is over, but the war, it's just beginning. The days after battle are always the hardest. The air is still thick with the smell of smoke and blood, but the adrenaline has long since faded, leaving behind a slow, aching exhaustion that sinks deep into your bones. Your muscles ache in ways they never have before, and you can't seem to shake the feeling of the battlefield from your mind. You go through the motions of your daily duties, checking the horses, polishing the armor, tending to your knight's needs, but every action feels mechanical, detached from the urgency that once filled your days. You look at the men around you, squires, knights, soldiers, and you see the same exhaustion in their eyes. Some have already begun to prepare for the next skirmish, sharpening their weapons, double-checking their armor. Others are nursing wounds, trying to rest, though sleep is a luxury few can afford. The castle is quieter than usual, as if it too is recovering from the events of the past few days. Sir Gritchfield is no exception. He's quieter than usual, his usual confidence tempered by the heavy weight of what he's just endured. He barely speaks, his gaze often fixed on the horizon, lost in thought. You're used to his moods, but this one feels different. There's a distance between the two of you now, a chasm that wasn't there before. He's seen death, felt it in his bones, and you can see that it's changed him. And in some ways, it's changed you too. It's not that you're afraid of battle. You've been training for this your entire life. You've watched knights fight. You've learned the art of the sword. You've even felt the weight of it in your hands. But the reality of war, of what it costs, what it takes from everyone involved, is something you weren't fully prepared for. The faces of the fallen haunt you, their eyes frozen in fear or pain, their bodies scattered across the field like discarded dolls. You wonder how many of them were like you, young men with dreams of glory, only to have those dreams torn away in the blink of an eye. The silence in the camp is broken by a voice, a low rumbling growl that only the truly desperate could muster. You turn to see the lord of the estate approaching, flanked by his guards. His face is grim, his posture rigid with anger. You've seen him in the castle before, but you've never had reason to interact with him directly. His eyes are sharp, calculating. He stops in front of Sir Gritchfield, eyes narrowing as he surveys the scene. The tension is palpable, thick enough to cut with a sword. Sir Gritchfield, the lord, begins, his voice cool and measured. "A word with you, if I may." Sir Gritchfield straightens his face, unreadable. "Of course, my lord. What is it?" The lord hesitates for a moment before speaking, his gaze flicking toward the horizon. There are whispers, rumors perhaps, but rumors that spread like fire in dry grass. Your actions on the battlefield have raised some concerns among certain parties. The loyalty of your men is being questioned. The words hang in the air, heavy with accusation. You can feel the shift in Sir Gritchfield's posture, the subtle tightening of his shoulders, the barely concealed fury behind his eyes. You step forward, ready to defend him, to stand by his side, as you've always done. But Sir Gritchfield raises a hand, signaling you to stand down. "This is no time for politics," Sir Gritchfield says, his voice calm but with a hint of steel beneath it. "We've just fought for our lives, and now is not the time to question loyalty." The lord's lips twist into a thin smile, but there's nothing friendly about it. Loyalty. Sir Gritchfield is earned, not given, and some are beginning to wonder if you've earned it. You were given command in battle. Your victory was expected, but... He trails off, letting the words hang between them like a dark cloud. Sir Gritchfield's jaw clenches. "My lord, I've done all that was asked of me. We've won the battle, and I've led my men with honor. And yet..." The lord steps closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You've left a trail of questions in your wake. Your methods have been unorthodox. some might say reckless. You were seen retreating from the front lines, leaving your men to fend for themselves. The accusation is a sharp blade cutting through the air with precision. Sir Gritchfield stiffens, and you can see the anger boiling beneath the surface. But still, he doesn't lash out. He remains calm, composed, despite the storm brewing inside him. "I've made choices," Sir Gritchfield says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Decisions that were difficult, yes. But I did what I believed was best for my men. If others disagree, then so be it. But they will answer to me, not to you." The Lord's smile fades, and for a moment, the tension between them feels as if it could snap. The Lord glares at Sir Gritchfield, and you can almost feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging in the air. But then, after what feels like an eternity, the Lord nods once sharply. "Very well," he says, his tone still icy. "But know this, Sir Gritchfield, I am watching you, and your loyalty will be tested. This is not the last time we will have this conversation." With that, the Lord turns and walks away, leaving Sir Gritchfield standing there, his eyes burning with frustration, and something else, something darker. You don't move. You don't speak. You simply watch, as your knight stands there, his posture stiff, the weight of the Lord's words pressing down on him like a crushing weight. When the Lord is out of sight, Sir Gritchfield finally exhales, the tension draining from his shoulders. He turns to you, and for a brief moment, there's a flicker of something in his eyes. Regret. Anger. It's hard to tell. "Get the horses ready," he says, his voice tight. "We leave at first light." You nod, not asking questions, not probing for answers. You simply turn and go preparing for the next leg of your journey, your heart heavy with the knowledge that this is far from over. The battle may have ended, but the war both on the field and within the hearts of those who fight is just beginning. The morning sun rises dull and gray as you and Sir Gritchfield make your preparations to leave the camp. The air is thick with the lingering remnants of battle-wet earth, the faint scent of fire, and something else, something less tangible, the residue of uncertainty. The Lord's words from the previous day are still echoing in your mind, a constant reminder that despite the outward appearance of victory, there are still many questions left unanswered. You approach Thunderhoof, your trusted steed, who's already pawing at the ground with the impatience of a horse that's seen more than its fair share of battlefields. He's eager to leave, eager to find solid ground again. You pat his neck, adjusting the saddle and ensuring everything is in place, and you can't help but feel that same sense of unease bubbling within you. Something is changing. The future, once a hazy blur on the horizon, is becoming clearer and less welcoming. Sir Gritchfield walks toward you, his armor gleaming in the soft morning light. His face is grim, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper than they were before. His eyes, though, are sharp, betraying none of the doubt that the Lord's words surely caused. He's the knight, the one who leads, and he knows the importance of appearing unwavering, even when his own heart might be filled with doubt. "Ready?" he asks, his voice gruff but steady. You nod, securing your own gear. "Ready, my lord." You mount Thunderhoof and fall into formation behind Sir Gritchfield as you leave the camp behind. The road stretches before you, winding through the hills, the morning fog clinging to the trees like a blanket. It's quiet now, almost too quiet. The remnants of the previous day's chaos feel distant, but the tension still lingers, hanging over the land like a dark cloud. As you ride, your thoughts drift back to the Lord's words. Loyalty will be tested. Those words are more than just a warning. They're a challenge. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that it's not just Sir Gritchfield's loyalty that's being tested. It's yours, too. You've been a squire for years now, a loyal servant to your knight. But the question is, what happens when your loyalty is called into question? What happens when the knight you've served so faithfully, the man you've sworn to follow, is the one under suspicion? You know that loyalty isn't just a matter of holding a sword or standing by someone's side in battle. It's about trust, too. And trust, as you've seen, is fragile. Once it's broken, it's not so easy to mend. The Lord's words were a reminder that loyalty isn't a given. It's something that must be earned and tested. As you ride, the landscape begins to change. The hills give way to dense forest, the trees tall and imposing, their branches reaching out like dark fingers. The air smells different here, cooler, heavier, with the scent of pine and damp earth. It's the kind of place where secrets could easily be kept, where shadows seem to stretch farther than the light can reach. And it's here among the trees that you begin to feel the weight of what's coming. You're no longer just a squire, no longer just a servant to Sir Gritchfield. You're beginning to realize that you too have a role to play in this strange game of loyalty, power, and survival. Your choices, your actions will determine not only your future, but the future of everyone you've come to care about. You can feel it in the pit of your stomach, a knot that tightens with each passing mile. Sir Gritchfield breaks the silence, his voice low and urgent. We're approaching the border. Keep your wits about you. You nod, the weight of his words sinking in. This is it, the edge of everything you've known, the point of no return. Beyond the trees lies the land of your enemy, a place where trust is just as fragile, and loyalty is often tested by the sword. It's a place where alliances can be broken in an instant, where friendships can turn to dust. You've heard the stories, of course, but hearing them and living them are two very different things. The tension in the air thickens as you approach the border. The sounds of nature grow muted, as though even the birds are holding their breath. Your horse's hooves beat softly against the dirt, but each step feels heavier than the last. You glance at Sir Gritchfield, watching as he scans the horizon, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. There's no fear in his eyes, only determination. He's ready. You're ready too, or at least you hope you are. You've been told stories about crossing into enemy territory, about the dangers, the ambushes, the traps that lie waiting for the unwary. But those stories are just that, stories. You've never experienced it firsthand. Not until now. As you pass the final line of trees, you feel it. The shift. The moment when the landscape changes from familiar to foreign. The border is marked by a single, crumbling stone archway barely visible through the overgrown vines and moss. It's ancient, weathered by time, but it stands there as a silent reminder of the long history of conflict between the two realms. The arch is both a symbol of division and a challenge, one that no knight or squire can ignore. You ride beneath it, your heart pounding in your chest. For a moment, everything feels suspended in time. The forest on either side is silent, the air thick with the weight of history. And then, as if on cue, the sound of a horse's hooves echoes from behind you. You turn to see a rider approaching fast. His armor gleams in the dim light, his horse a blur of motion. You don't need to be told who he is. You know. It's a messenger, a scout, and the news he carries is never good. The rider pulls up alongside you, his face grim. Sir Gritchfield. He says, his voice tight with urgency. We've been spotted. They know we're here. Sir Gritchfield doesn't hesitate. Ready yourself, Squire. He orders, his voice cold and steady. We move swiftly. Keep your guard up. And just like that, everything changes. The tension that had been building for days, weeks, even snaps. You're no longer just following your knight. You're part of this battle, this movement, this fight for something greater than you could have imagined. Your role has shifted. You are no longer an observer. You are a participant, whether you're ready or not. The weight of your sword feels heavier now. The shield at your side suddenly seems far more significant. Your heart races as you prepare for the unknown, your thoughts scattered with the uncertainty of what lies ahead. But one thing is clear, there is no turning back. There's only forward. The sound of distant horns reaches your ears, and in that moment you know that the true test of loyalty has begun. This is not just a battle for survival. It's a battle for the very heart of everything you've fought for. And no matter what happens, you will stand by your knight, by Sir Gritchfield, even as the future unfolds around you, uncertain and wild. The enemy is closing in. The time to act has arrived. The horns sound again, distant, but growing louder like a rumble of thunder on the horizon. You can feel the shift in the air. Suddenly everything seems sharper, more urgent. The road ahead isn't just a path anymore. It's the space between life and death, between victory and failure. Your heart pounds, matching the rhythm of Thunderhoof's hooves beneath you as you ride alongside Sir Gritchfield, the distant sounds of the enemy growing ever closer. You're no longer just a spectator to these battles. This is your moment. This is where you find out what kind of squire you've truly become. The forest gives way to a clearing, the trees parting, as though the land itself is making way for the inevitable clash of armies. In the distance, you see the rising walls of a fortress, its silhouette dark against the stormy sky. This is where the battle will unfold. Sir Gritchfield's voice cuts through the tension, calm but firm, giving orders as his eyes scan the horizon. Stay close. Do not engage unless I say so. You nod, gripping your sword tighter. Your mind races, adrenaline surging through you, every fiber of your being prepared for what's to come. You've trained for this. You've imagined it 1,000 times, fighting side by side with your knight, defending honor, proving yourself. But now that the moment is here, you feel the weight of it, the weight of real responsibility. You aren't just a servant anymore. You're part of this war. The enemy approaches in a steady line, their banners flying in the wind. The sight is both magnificent and terrifying. Knights in full armor, infantry soldiers with swords raised high, archers with arrows notched and ready to be loosed. You can hear the sound of their feet pounding the earth, a steady rhythm that matches your heartbeat. You swallow hard, forcing yourself to focus. There's no time for hesitation, no time for fear. You've come this far. You will see it through. Sir Gritchfield signals for you to stay behind him, and you do, moving quickly to his side as he mounts Thunderhoof. His expression is unreadable, his usual bravado replaced by a grim determination. He meets your eyes for a moment, a flicker of something passing between you. It's a look you've seen countless times before, a look that says he's depending on you. You've always known that, but today it feels heavier than ever. The battle begins in a sudden rush of motion. The first clash of swords rings out across the field, the sound of metal on metal, screams of men and horses alike as they collide. You're not in the heart of it yet, but the tension is palpable. You can feel the weight of every move, every decision made. Your job is simple, yet critical. With your knight, stay alert, be ready for anything. You watch as Sir Gritchfield rides into the fray, his sword raised high. His movements are fluid, practiced, every swing of his sword precise, every step calculated. He fights with the kind of skill and ferocity that you've always admired. But even in the chaos of battle, there's a sense of control to him. He knows what he's doing. He's been here before, and so have you in a way. Your training has prepared you for moments like this. You've learned how to hold a shield, how to use a sword. You know how to move on the battlefield, how to stay out of the way when needed, and how to act quickly when the time comes. But this is different. This is real. The battle isn't a drill. It's not practice. It's the difference between life and death. Your hand grips the hilt of your sword, your knuckles turning white as you try to steady your breathing. Every movement seems to happen in slow motion, every swing of the sword, every shout from the men around you, every thundering hoofbeat. You can feel the ground beneath you vibrating with the chaos of the clash. The battlefield is alive, and you are in the heart of it. At some point, you find yourself on the front lines. You're fighting now, not just following orders, not just carrying a shield. You raise your sword and swing, feeling the satisfying thud as it connects with an opponent's shield. Your opponent, a burly soldier in dark armor, swings back. You block the force of his strike, rattling your bones, but you manage to steady yourself, raising your shield just in time to deflect the next blow. You move your body, reacting almost instinctively, sidestepping, swinging, blocking. You're not thinking about anything else now. There's no room for doubt, no room for hesitation. You're part of this battle. You're not just a squire anymore. You're a warrior. The weight of the sword feels different now, heavier, but somehow right. The battle rages around you. You lose track of time. Hours feel like minutes. There's no clear line between friend and foe anymore. The smoke from the fires stings your eyes, and the air is thick with the sound of battle, the clash of swords, the whinny of horses, the cries of the wounded. It's overwhelming. It's everything you've trained for, and yet it's more chaotic than you ever imagined. At some point you lose track of where Sir Gritchfield is. He's somewhere in the thick of it, leading the charge, fighting with the precision and power you've always admired. But you're here now, on your own. You find yourself facing another soldier, his sword raised high. He's faster than you anticipated, and his blade connects with yours, knocking it from your hand. Your heart skips a beat as you stumble back, unarmed. The soldier moves in, but before he can strike, a blur of motion knocks him aside. Sir Gritchfield appears at your side, his sword flashing as he takes down your attacker with a swift blow. You breathe a sigh of relief, but there's no time to linger. The battle is still ongoing, and there's no guarantee of safety for either of you. "You all right?" Sir Gritchfield asks, his voice calm despite the chaos. You nod, still shaking from the close call. "I'm fine." He doesn't say anything else. He just nods and moves forward, his eyes scanning the battlefield for the next threat. You follow him, ready for whatever comes next. The enemy is strong, but so are you. You've been training for years for this moment, and now that it's here, you realize something: you're not just here to serve. You're here to fight. The battle continues, and the world around you becomes a blur. It's no longer just a fight for survival. It's a fight for everything. For loyalty, for honor, for the men who stand beside you. You fight not just for your knight, but for yourself. For the future you're starting to shape, one strike at a time. As the final echoes of battle fade, the dust settles and the camp begins to quiet. There's a strange, almost eerie stillness that fills the air. The clash of swords, the pounding of hooves, the cries of the wounded. All those sounds are becoming distant memories, now swallowed up by the peace that comes only after the storm. It's a kind of peace you didn't think you'd ever fully understand until you stood in the aftermath of it. You've been through so much, seen so much. Blood, sweat, victory, and loss. And yet, as you sit on the cold ground that night, staring into the flickering flames of the fire, there's a calmness that settles over you. You didn't think you'd make it this far. But here you are, alive, still standing, still fighting. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to realize that this path, this journey, is your own. You aren't just a shadow, a reflection of the knight you serve. You are shaping your own fate, one decision at a time. The camp is quieter now, the men finally resting, the horses fed and tended. Sir Gritchfield has disappeared into the shadows of his tent, no doubt reflecting on the same things you are. But there's something different now. The weight of the world no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a challenge, and you're ready for whatever comes next. As you lay down under the starlit sky, the sounds of the night surround you. The crackling fire, the gentle rustling of the trees, the distant hum of crickets. You close your eyes, breathing in the cool air, letting the serenity wash over you. For tonight, at least, there's peace. And tomorrow you'll rise again, ready for whatever comes.